Well, it's been quite a long journey to actually being here, and I feel honoured that you asked me to speak today. It happened when my mother moved out of the Richmond house, and us, her three children, helped her buy a house in Brunswick. And she was 64, and she got a loan as a single female, which was quite unheard of. And the three of us went guarantor. So she moved into the Brunswick house, and I was cleaning out some drawers, and I found an A4 sort of notebook. It wasn't even, it was one of those with the plastic top on that all the papers would actually just disappear. And I said to my mum, "What is this?" And she goes, "It's my life story." And I said, "Oh, I didn't know that you wrote that." Because Mum didn't have much schooling. She left really early, being a female in Cyprus. They didn't, the woman wasn't going to get an education. So she read a lot of books, and Mum was quite well read. So I said to her, "Can you read me some of this?" And she started reading me the first chapter, and I was like, wow, that's pretty heavy. She starts off with her accident. And then she didn't read much more, and she said to me, "I can't read anymore because it is too painful for me to read." So then I just put it away. And then a few years later, I got it back out again. And I thought I need to turn this into a story for the family. So we found a lady, a friend of my mother's, who just literally translated it from Greek straight to English. And it was a pretty raw translation. I got it bound in a book, and it looked like an encyclopedia with a little gold edging. And the book was called A Mother's Pain. So that book was there. Then years and years later, a friend of mine was doing a story on my mum, and he's got a book called Tales of Cyprus, a couple of pages, and he said, "Oh, your mum's got a bigger story." I said, "Yes, she has." And he encouraged me to write maybe the full story. So then I took the pages. I didn't know how to write. I left school really early, and I started looking at it and turning it into some sort of a book. I did some writing courses. I didn't know what goes first. Is there something before an introduction? And then as I went along, I then somehow managed to get a book out of it. Yeah, and it's in 3 parts. Part 1 is my mum's story. Part 2 is still her story. It's reflections and emotions, and it's in a diary form. And then part 3 is the Richmond house. So I needed to tie my mum's story in somehow, because mum's is very emotional, very raw, and it's very real. So I put my section in, which then explains what the house looks like, what the shop smelled like. Yeah, which is, our house is the one at the back there, in the middle, which looks the same as when we were living there. Yeah.
Yep, and on the bottom of the house is
my uncle's shoe repair business. So we lived on Bridge Road. My mum came out in 57. I'm not going to give too much of the book away. In 57, and I was born in, okay, you know my age, 58.
very good. Yeah.
I was born in 58, and I lived with my mother, and in the end, my brother and sister, I was in the Richmond house for 23 years. And when the migrants came, before I was born and even after, everyone stayed in the Richmond house. So we had 3 or 4 generations living in the one house. And it was my uncle's house, and he allowed my mum to live there for 23 years.
Yep, and when Helena mentioned this, I went, I used to take my shoes off for household here. So the connections. Yeah, oh, just amazing, yeah. So, Helena, you've done an amazing job to write a book. I mean, it's, for those that experience of writers and authors, it's hard enough, but to start from the beginning and to produce such an amazing quality product, you've done enormous achievements, so well done.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. So you grew up in Bridge Road, as you saw in there. What was life for you? What was life like for you there, and what stood out?
Okay. It's hard to go back and remember because I was so young. But what did stand out to me was that there was a community spirit because, as you said, a lot of the Greeks came to Richmond. and there were lots and lots of neighbours, and we didn't know just our next door neighbour. We knew the neighbours, a kilometre away, and my mum used to walk everywhere. And so the main thing that sticks in my mind is the community spirit. And we always had people in the house. Like it was, I'm imagining it would be like when they lived in Cyprus, when everyone came over and had a coffee. My grandmother eventually came out from Cyprus and also lived in the house. And one thing I write in the book, which is quite funny, we moved rooms like so many times to accommodate all the new arrivals. And we did stay in that big front room under the tram stop, which was very noisy. And that room was under the shoe repair shop. So every morning my uncle would turn on the sanding machine and the noise would just reverberate right into our bedroom. So, and that was like at 6 o'clock.
You knew exactly what he was doing. That you're doing this now, that's almost a routine.
So it was quite an interesting life.
Yeah, absolutely. And Yarra Park State School, primary school, they call them later on, you went there as well. What was it like there going to school?
Well, I need to say that, first of all, we went to one of the most beautiful looking schools in Melbourne, I think, maybe in Victoria. It's all very patchy again. I think what did stand out to me was that I was a migrant going to an English school. I went to school with no English because my first language was Greek. I remember enjoying school, wanting to go there, and one of the main things that sticks in my mind is that I wanted to fit in. So I never spoke Greek when I was at school, even to the Greek kids. I just wanted to be an Australian, so I embraced the Australian culture, and a lot of my friends were Australian as well. But one thing that really actually is quite funny is my grandmother used to walk us to school. She came from Cyprus, and it's quite embarrassing when you're a child. Not only because she's your grandmother, but because she's your grandmother wearing black from head to toe, and she never went out without her apron. So she had her apron on, with her headscarf on, and her slippers on. And it was great. She walked us to school.
Yeah. That's amazing, yeah. So what were the challenges you faced living in Richmond? Any things that stood out as being real challenges in growing up?
I think there were some challenges being from a migrant background, basically. I personally didn't feel them, but I know that my brother felt them when he went to high school. He was bullied. He had an eye that turned in. It's in the story how that happened. And he wore glasses, very, very thick glasses, and he was quite a slight boy, and he was bullied in Richmond High. And I was very, very shy and quiet, and I was powerless to speak up or to help him. And all this went on, and we never told my mum because we just didn't talk about the bullying. It was just part of the culture. So I think that was one of the challenges, but I didn't really find I had any challenges personally myself that I can't think of at this moment.
How did you learn English?
I don't know.
Because your mum's speaking Greek.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's hard enough for kids to learn English, let alone English and Greek.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm thinking I learned my English when I went to the Melba primary school?
Kindergarten.
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 Yeah. So again, my mum used to walk us down there. I'm not sure my grandmother was there at the time. I think I must have learned my English there. Yeah, basically.
Yep. It's incredible. Because we actually had a query. Tell us about the Greek gambling den, which is a couple of shops up from where you are.
Oh, I didn't. Oh, that's Hollywood.
Yeah, actually Hollywood Palace, where they make great souvlaki, they're just shut down.
Oh, have they?
Yeah, I'm going, no.
We used to go there all the time.
Yeah.
But I didn't know about the gambling.
Great your bet. Yep, but just down a bit further towards Lee Place on the corner there. And that got burnt down because there's a lot of stuff going on. But it's amazing what happens in communities as well. Let's keep going though. So the title, When the Past Awakens, is really a very powerful title that really is raw and hits the nerves of just so much stuff. Every time I was reading, I'd go back and just check what was happening because You couldn't put everything in this book. There's so much more that probably was untold.
I've actually been asking my mum questions now. And by the way, everyone, my mum is still alive. Which someone asked me, my friend Louise asked me, yeah, mum is still alive. She's 98 in June. She's at home.
Wow.
And we all care for her. And my son was living with her for about 4 years, caring for her. And now I'm caring for her, but the whole family does care for her now. So she's in good hands. She still suffers from it back home. But let's go back to the title. The title, when my mum wrote her diaries, she called it A Mother's Pain. Now, I'm reading the first chapter, and once it's translated, and I read it, I took it home and read it in bed. And I read the whole thing throughout the whole night. I couldn't put it down, and it was the raw version without the Richmond house in it, of course. And I was crying. And then there was a section in it, this comes later when I'm actually doing this book. The first chapter is my mum lays down on the floor after she has her accident, upstairs in the room, and she lets the tears flow. And when the tears stop, she goes, and the past awakened within me. So I went, bang, that's the title. It's When the Past Awakens. And the subtitle, I didn't want to take her title away, so I made her title A Mother's Pain. Yeah.
Oh,
So that's
it really says a lot, you know, when you really understand why. And as I said, there's probably a lot of stuff that even yourself reading, you're just probably crying.
Yeah.
And just the things you've learned of what your mother's done and the resilience and the pain she's gone through, but probably she never showed that. She was just probably pretty brave on lots of times.
Yeah.
So how did your mother feel about sharing her personal recollections in such a way? I mean, it's quite very revealing.
It's yeah.
I just thank her so much for sharing this.
I did ask her permission. I actually got it down in writing in case she got the mention or anything. But I did ask her many times. I said, "Do you want this story revealed?" And there's some not graphic. It's not a misery story, but there's a chapter in there which is very confronting. And I said, "Do you want people to read that?" And she said, "Yes." And it's 50 years since that all happened. She goes, "It doesn't matter anymore." So she gave me permission to tell her story. And it's very raw. It's very real. It's a lot of Greek women didn't actually write anything down anyway, but Mum's written so much that's very, very personal, very, very deep, very, I can't explain, but it's basically from the heart. Yeah.
Yeah, just as I said when I read it, I just put it down that you think it's almost like I knew your mother by reading this book. That's how her voice speaks out.
And I did, one of the main things is I needed to keep her voice. I had a friend help me edit it, and she said, "Oh, let's change this, let's change that." And I go, "No, you've got to keep my mum's voice up here. The sentence might be back the front, but that's how the Greeks speak." We did change some around, and I had to rejig the whole diary. But yeah, my main aim was to make sure when you read this book, you know that you're reading a migrant woman's story.
And as you said, you know, very little schooling took place. For her to write the way she's done, just amazing, incredible to articulate her feelings in such a very powerful way.
Exactly, and she had a lot of insight, and I do feel that my mother was quite wise before her time, and she's got a lot of wise sayings in there. And yeah, she was very, I think she read a lot of books. My grandfather used to sneak books to her in Cyprus, because my grandmother didn't want to learn to read. Yeah.
That's just incredible. And on the front book here, 2020 shortlist as well.
Shortlisted.
Yep, and with the Royal Historical Society of Victoria, commendation for your book as well. So other people who've read your book, what have they said? What's their impressions? I'm not going to some of mine, but other people.
I've had amazing reactions that I would never have expected. I've had people write to me or text me in COVID and say, "I've just read your mum's book, again, I couldn't put it down. It resonated with me. I can't believe your mum went through this." And just recently, a friend from my running group read it and we came to running in the morning, and she looked at me and she goes, I've only just read a few pages, and she had tears in her eyes.
Yes.
And she says, oh my goodness, your mother. I said, yes, and she's now finished it. And I've had some friends come to my mum's house, one particular is here, and she goes, I've got to meet your mother. And a few others wanted to, but were in COVID, and they came to meet my mum. So it has that, it does that. Yes, you want to meet the person that wrote this story. But with the shortlisting, it's quite, this whole book feels to me like it was an accident, okay? I found my mum's diaries. I turned them into a family book. I then went, I became a little bit obsessed trying to get this book done because my mum's now 98 and this came out 2019. And I said, Mum, you can't die. You're not allowed to die until the book comes out. And she's still alive, so she's waiting for something else. I don't know what it is. But with the shortlisting, of course, I contacted you, and then you said you better take it to the Royal Historical Society. So they said, yeah, bring the book in, bring 3 copies to sell. I go, oh, great, you're going to sell it too. And bring 1 copy to archive and 3 copies for an award. And they sent me this paper to fill in. The hardest thing was writing a synopsis, 50 words. So I kept cutting. Anyway, I gave them the synopsis, the piece of paper, and forgot about it. I didn't know what awards they were, to be quite honest. And then I get an email and it says, congratulations, When the Past Awakens has been shortlisted. And I read it a few times and going, this must be wrong, but it can't be wrong because they've actually mentioned the title of the book. It's not just a generic email going to anyone. So that's how it got shortlisted. And I told my mum, and there's no word for shortlisting. So I said it's been accept, which means it's been recognised. So she can't believe it. She can't actually believe people are reading her story.
Yeah, and to be shortlisted is a huge accomplishment. There are so many historians that write and submit their books to the Royal Historical Society of Victoria, and it's very competitive, very challenging, and to be shortlisted means you're blowing the socks off. It really is, and I mean that's congratulations. I think
Thank you.
That is a huge acknowledgement. And given having to write a book, and you've not done this before.
I've never done it. I left school so early. I had to teach myself how to write. I didn't know how to write dialogue. So anyway, it was amazing.
Yep, and you mentioned that you want to read a paragraph about In Two Parts or something. Is that
yes?
Do you want to cover those?
Yeah.
Just to give you a glimpse of the book, because as I said, I could not put it down. I could feel the emotion, but also relate to other people that I knew, Greeks and other nationalities. When I was growing up, I would say, I think we can see some things happening. Yeah.
Okay, this is we don't have numbers in the chapters. We just have, this is called My Engagement. I was engaged in May 1951. I remember it was hot. We had plenty of fruit during the season in Cyprus, my homeland. My father had arranged my engagement without asking me whether I wanted to marry him or not. I had to accept because I had no other choice. They had taught me to bow my head and take orders, as I was born a female. My mother was harsh and authoritarian. Many times I thought, how did my father live with her for so many years? He either hid his suffering or he truly loved her. They came, I remember, one Wednesday evening, my father-in-law and my fiancé, Andreas. It was like drawing up papers of a sale for property. This is buying a husband to marry. Then after all was signed, he made you his. You became his slave instead of your mother's. This was tradition in my homeland, and I believe it still happens. Finally, my father talked about what he would give as a dowry, a few fields, a property in Lanka on the road to that's a very good hard to say, a church, and a house, since my father was lucky to have only one daughter and 5 sons who would carry on the family name. The house would be given to me later when my parents passed, as they would remain living in our village and family home. My mother was so proud she had 5 sons, and she did not consider me as important, as I would not retain the family name once I'm married. My name would be changed forever. So that's my mum, how she got engaged. But what I'd like to do now is go to the back of the book, and this will sort of sum up how Mum is feeling. She's in Australia, and this sort of sums up a little bit more about how she feels. Now that I'm writing this story, I am reliving the moments I once felt, and I'm unloading a burden that I have carried on my back. I've been carrying the pain and disappointment on my back all these years now, during which I was obligated to keep quiet wherever I went, because I did not want anyone's pity or support. It is like feeling in front of others inferior. In those times and many years ago, we minded our own business and kept our secrets to ourselves. It would have been scandalous to reveal our private lives, and those who knew said nothing. I believe this still can be the way today. Fear is a curse. Mental torment, dark days of dark feelings, depression. It's got a name now, and not an illness. It was something you kept to yourself, to deal with in your own way. Why would I burden others with how I was feeling? To show them my weakness? This was not our way. And would they listen when they had their families and their burdens to deal with? I felt insignificant so many times and lost my way in life. Lost my way in the life I was given. So that's just the beginning, and how Mum's dealing with whatever I won't give it away.
Yep, there's a lot in between the pages there, because it's about faith, community, religion, all the stuff that kicks in. And sometimes, while reading the book, I could see that sometimes people are cruel around the outside, because if you're not quite fitting in, you're excluded and a whole lot of stuff. And when you're looking for help as well, and even working in the pie factory.
Yes.
Was that Herbert Adams? No.
No, it was called Stack Pies.
Stack Pies, yep.
And it was just down the road. Literally, she went out the back door, which was the gate, and walked down the laneway.
Yep.
At the middle of the night. And I used to think my mum was going to get attacked, which I write in the book. Because I'm only young and Mum's getting up in the middle of the night, going out into the dark down the laneway to go to work.
And you can imagine going, leaving children there, working, coming back, then having to ready for school.
Yeah.
Just
and that's why
end to end.
We brought my grandmother to help us.
Yeah.
And the other thing, Mum worked with a lot of men, and she always wore her wedding band and said she was married. And she did get some advances and some sexual harassment back then. It wasn't called that, I don't know what it was called. But maybe it was called sexual harassment, but she was pretty strong. And another thing in the 60s, a lot of the women didn't work. They stayed home to look after the house or the kids. So Mum was rare to actually be going out working as a single mother as well. I know a lot of women did work in factories, but a lot of my mum's family members all stayed home. None of them worked. None of the women worked. Yeah.
It was more the done thing. You almost said, no, it's not right for you to work, you must be home.
Yeah, you must be home.
And that really prevented a lot of women actually becoming who they could be as well, want to be, because of just the pressure around them as well. And I think when I read your book as well, just to include Richmond House and Leon's words in there, I think it just shows that from your mother, her values, her beliefs, and her expectations flowed onto yourself and your children of upstanding citizens, the right values, standing on your feet, be who you are. Don't be led by other people pushing down a different pathway, but become the person you're meant to be. Want to tell us a bit about Richmond House and Leon's?
Yeah. With Leon's section, I approached Leon, my son, and I said to him, would you like to write something? Because you were the first grandchild and you were looked after by Leon. And he said yes, so he did. He put his little section in, and it's I might even just read. It might be easier if I just read a section from that bit, not a whole lot, but I put his section in at the back, and it's called. So I'm not prepared for that one, so I haven't got it in marked. Here we go. I put Leon's section in at the back. At the end of my mum's story, before my story, and it starts off like this. My name is Leon King, and I was born in 1990. I am the first-born grandson of my yaya, Maria Flum, and the first child of Helena King. My sister Kalanda was born 23 months after me. Yaya's next two grandsons came along some 9 years later. I had my yaya all to myself for a long time. She would babysit me when my mother had to work nights or Saturday after my parents' divorce. I felt a very special connection to my yaya as a child, and even more so now as a 29-year-old. Leon's now 31. It was 2017, and I had been in hospital for 5 days with crippling back pain from a bulging disc and needed an operation. I was to be placed in isolation for 1 week. This incident delayed my surgery by 1 month. I had painful shingles and back spasms. My body had broken down from the pain, 9 long months of not being able to work or to move freely. I had been doing the rounds of doctors and specialists before finally being diagnosed. I had been relying on my parents for transport as well as many other daily tasks. I could barely move. I was taking pain management medication, and I had been in body days for 9 long months. My mother thought this was the time to read my yaya's story, the original Greek to English translation. My mother just handed me the book when she visited me in the isolation unit and said, I think it's time for you to read this. Reading someone else's story who is close to you can make your situation a little better. My yaya and I both had severe back pain, but my yaya's pain was never going to go away. I read her story that day and cried my many tears for her. How she keeps going, I will truly never understand. I respect her resilience, resolve, and endurance. And then Leon goes on to say that he spent a lot of time with his yaya, going shopping, coming home, and she would show him how to cook, and he knows how to make good meals. And they had this real amazing connection, and she'd take him out into the garden and show him how to paint tomatoes and how to look after the garden. So I just thought it's a bit cruel of me. He's in isolation, in pain, and I throw him my mum's book to read.
And that's Leon at the back there.
Leon's at the back
as well. Yeah.
There
Which
he
is
is.
great.
And he still cares for mum. Yeah, there's a real bond there, a beautiful bond.
Yep, and to read the story of her whole journey and what she's done, it's just an eye-opener of just what life is like and what people are feeling. And it really gives you a bit of a blueprint of, on the surface things look pretty cool, but down below the stuff you don't see. So I guess when you have this book, and we're talking about sexual and domestic violence in communities we're hearing now, and particularly in the Greek community, and you shared your mother's story, and I think the timing of your book, even now what we've got, most of the stuff's kind of below the surface, and we don't talk about that, but to get up there really starts to raise the awareness of that. Often people who are going along, things are fine, they actually don't even see the stuff, but so many people have been hurting for such a long time. It is a revelation, and I think just the timing of your book, with what we're going through now in government and community and schools, it's amazing what you've got and the timing as to the amount of hurt that people have endured have been trying to raise it.
It's incredible because I grew up without a father. He left when I was 3. My mother couldn't even tell us about our father. So I went through life without even asking Mum, where's our father, at all. So it was when I was in high school that my mum sat me down to tell me why we didn't have a father. And she didn't tell me much. She just said he left. She didn't tell me nothing else about her life. I didn't know anything about her harassment as well. So we were in the dark. Mum kept it hidden. It was taboo. It was shameful to actually speak about even that you weren't happy, that you were depressed. And what I have written, I just wrote something out because that question is so important that I thought I'm not going to know how to answer it just off the cuff. So I've actually written something down, which I'll read out to you. This book and its story is relevant today more than ever with what has been surfacing in the media recently through sexual abuse. It is rare for a Greek woman of my mother's generation to talk of such matters, let alone allow her story to be read by a wider audience. This took courage. The silent chain, stronger than a voice. These stories are so important, Maria's included. They needed to be told over and over and by many women who have been affected. Maybe then the message may get through that it is not all right. Maria has now become one of those amazing women speaking out with my support through her memoir, reaching many people, creating conversations in all communities, including the Greeks. How many women of her generation are still the silent victims? My aim is to make sure my mother's voice is not left unheard and that she does not take her story to her grave and be buried forever. So I don't think I could have said that, could I?
And they're powerful words.
Yeah, I had to write them down because I knew I just wouldn't have got it all in. Yeah, so, but besides that, my mum has been an unbelievable woman. She raised us to be strong, independent, to follow our dreams. She gave us everything that she never had. And she did everything in her power to make us fit in. And living in Richmond was, I think, fantastic. We could just step out of the shop and there was everything. Yeah, and we could walk everywhere too. Yeah.
That's fantastic. It really is. Again, what you shared with us, it's certainly lots of emotion and for yourself a lot of things that have been confronted yourself personally, and to write the book and to pull it together in a way that is digestible.
Yes.
For people to get it, because there's just so much more I'm sure you could put in, but to get the key chronology and the steps, to acknowledge the way your mother's written the book and not lost her voice,
Yes.
is really a skill in itself. And I think I just want to say thank you to your mother.
Yes, I will. I'll definitely.
Because her writing, even I don't keep diaries, what I've done,
My
just
diaries
to
are
do
just
that.
scribble.
Yeah. And to write the way, the important stuff that she's going through, her feelings, is a way to cope, I guess, as well. Rather than character, we talk about mental illness and that we have today. When I read what your mother's gone through, I goes to level 10 straight away. It's not just kind of like a bit. But for her to write on almost her own therapeutic way of dealing with those terrible things she's had to go through and struggle.
And we won't even touch on it. There's a whole section about my mum and her own mother in the book too, and that was another one of her struggles. But she's very articulate, and she wrote poetry, and there's a couple of her poems up there. Very in-depth poetry as well, really in-depth. So she's an amazing woman for her age, and I believe that my mum was probably a woman's leader before her time. She fought everything that she knew was not right in the system, in the Cypriot system, which is not her fault or anyone's fault. It just takes generations to change things. And I feel that my mum was one of those pioneers in changing the way she thought, the way she raised us. We were allowed to go out with any person. We didn't have to go out with a Greek guy. We could go out with any religion and any colour. So that's saying a lot for my mother.
Yeah, and she's something. The wisdom you mentioned is just amazing. And also, I see, again, to thank another because for her to write this is almost giving people permission to express their feelings as well, and to bring to the surface the pain people are feeling, they're being oppressed as well. So it's put a really good catalyst. So again, for her to have written that way back from when she first started to you, and again to you finding it, and then translate those notes to a book. And to what you're saying, what you leave out, and have brought together, it would have been extremely hard because you're also living through those stories at the same time.
But can we finish off with something a little bit light-hearted?
Absolutely, let's go. Yep.
One more reading.
Good on you. Yep.
I make the reading short because otherwise you'll fall asleep. Okay, this is where is it? This is beyond the Richmond house, so let's finish off with Richmond. The garage and the fencing at the Richmond house was old and run down. I would look through to next door past the old grey wooden paling fence that had so many gaps that I could put my whole skinny arm through. As my uncle didn't live there anymore, he wasn't aware that it needed repairs. Looking through the holes, I could see the next door garage, and hanging up there in neat little rows were the leather casings and rubber bladders off the course. Boxing glass made of leather was another product in there. Handmade leather footballs were next door specialty. That very shop next door to my uncle's business was the main supplier to all the football teams in Melbourne. Beneath all the hanging parts of the footballs were Hessian-type bales that were very soft. Very often we would look through and see tiny kittens that had just been born. Many times they would wander through the gaps in the old palings to our house and into the backyard of concrete. I would pick up and hold them for a while, giving them some milk, just adoring them. Most of the time their eyes would leave me. After spending time with the skinny and frail little kittens, I would then very carefully return them to their mothers. Before their mothers knew they were missing. Often we would keep one or two of the kittens as our own. Richmond was made up of lots of tiny businesses. Our childhood friends' parents owned shops, just like my uncles with their homes at the back or upstairs. And that shop next door made all the footballs for all the teams. Yeah, and Richmond, of course. I'm sure some of the footballers would come in, but I didn't know who they were back then to get their autographs.
It's amazing who you run into in Richmond. It's a very diverse place. Manufacturing, everything else, and people run into. A lot of footy players would live around the area and
they did,
quite a lot as well, which is great.
And that's where the footballs were made. So all those people that didn't come to night are at the footy.
Yep, that's where they are. Absolutely, yeah. Well, Helena, just again, we could probably talk another hour about some of the things, but it's best to buy the book and read the book. You'll find so much more information. Yeah, while we're here, yep. So it's just amazing, and I said, look, I learned so much, but I could reflect so much on other people that I saw around me, and the kids I went to school with, from the same kind of era as well. It's just a great way of actually making sure the history is not lost, but also that the truth be known to raise for other people and become more aware of it, and becomes a learning tool for others to start to share how they're feeling and to watch out for people.
Exactly.
That's the most important part.
True.
Thank you for writing it, pulling together and sharing with us today. Now, of course, we've been on Zoom, so